Hello. How are you?
I'm good.
Tired?
Yeah.
Working hard or hardly working?
Now the first one tonight. The first one's appropriate.
Hmm. Are you traveling? No.
No. I have a bar mitzvah in New Jersey, November. I'm going. That's my only travel.
What, your grandkid?
Yeah, Racheli's second son.
Oh boy. That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. Hi, Ernie.
Hi.
They don't have a.
Two. Adam Arbiyayin is a machlokas. One of the boundary holds Biyayin Duklama Lo Pliga the Bain in Tarti. If you're going to make a combination between mavui, between alleyways, with wine, then you certainly cannot use the wine to cover the chatzers. You would need to make a shituf as well as a eruv chatzers. Ki pligi b'pas. The only machlokes was with bread. Where Reb Meir would say you would not rely on pas. Meisvel ask you a kasha, but Chachamim oimrim. The Chachamim say, Oma Arvin Omish. You have a choice. You can make an Eruv Chatzeros, or you can make a Shita B'vos. Now, the Gemara understands that to mean, my love, Oma Arvin B'chatzer B'pas. You make all of the Eruv Chatzeros with bread, and that'll combine everything. O Mishtatfin B'mavon B'yayin, which seems to go against what we just said, that there's a machlokas if you make a shituf with wine, whether you can use it for the Eruv Chatzeros. Omrav Gidlam Rav Achikama. This is how you have to understand that piece. Either you make Erev Chatzeros with bread, and then it's permitted both by the sheet, by the mavui and the Chatzeros. Or you make a sheet of mavus with bread, umutarm kamakan. So when you do it with bread, it's going to be permitted no matter what. Vravuna Omar that you who said that the bread won't work. Excuse me, that wine won't work. You need bread. Vravuna Omar Minag Rab Meir. And Rav Yochanan Omar Naguam Rab Meir. It was just minig like Rav Meir. And the Ramah holds Yeshoimrim Shesoim Chmal Shituf B'mokom Eruv Af B'yayin. So the Ramah is lenient that even if they made a Shituf B'vos with wine, you can be Soimech on that. V'cheinu Abim B'koshel Echad So the Ramah is Meiko Mishnah. We're on Ayin Beis Amid Aleph. The new Mishnah. Chamisha chavura sheshavsu b'trakling achet. So this sounds like a big house, but the big house has many rooms, each room having a door that opens up to a chutzner. But they live in, it's going to be one address. It's one house. It's just the house is divided into 5, each which is with its own petzach to a chutzner, and the chutzner has other houses that opened up into that chutzner. You've got to collect an eruv from each one of those 5 different rooms. Even though it's one address, it's one house, but since each live in their own room, which has its own entrance to the chutzner, Beis Shammai says each one needs to participate in the eruv. Has to give either money to buy the bread. It's like Chamisha Batim. Beis Hillel oimrim erev echad lekulon. Beis Hillel says, ein mechitza zu chilik rishus. I'm reading Rashi. The walls that divide up these 5 rooms, it doesn't say that a rishus is different. The mechitza shvelehi. We're going to see in the Gemara that we're talking here about a low, we're not talking about a full wall that separates up into the, we're going to see, the Gemara is going to say this is talking about when there's like a wall that separates less than 10 tfachim. Hilkach, says Rashi, erev echad lekulan, according to Beis Hillel. Uvetocha traklin nami motzim mizul zubelo eruv. And of course, in the house, you can carry without the eruv. Shat traklin mechabrin. This house combines all of them. So since between them they don't need an eruv, nasa echad mehem shliach lekulan. So one of the 5 can be a shliach for all of them to make an eruv with the other people that open up into the chutzner. However, back to the Mishnah, umoidim bisman shemiktzos and shurim b'chadorim or balios. Let's say, let's say some are in balconies or upstairs areas. Then each one needs to give their own eruv. Because there's a clear separation. Each one lives in their own room with full walls up to the ceiling. So then each one would have to make their own eruv. And Amrav Nachman, machloikes b'mesipis. This machloikes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, a mesipis is not a full wall. It's a very low divider between areas, less than 10 tfachim. That's when Beis Hillel will argue. Beis Shammai says that these little walls are not enough of a chiluk, and therefore it's like 5 different people dwelling there, and then each one has to make an eruv. And Beis Hillel will hold that no, that those divisions are also makes a division. It makes different reshuyos, even if it's even though it's a mechitza nemucha, says Rashi. Says Rashi, if you have low walls, it's considered like one bias. But let's say you have a wall that divides between these 5 people, that the wall is 10 tefachim high. So then even Beis Hillel will agree, divrei hakol, erev kol chavura v'chavura. That's the first lashon of Rav Nachman. That the machloikas is only when you're talking, you have a low wall. Ikidi Amri, but there's another version that on Rav Nachman, af b'mesipes machloikas, that it's a machloikas delot tema Beis Shammai b'mechitza asara huda asri. Don't say that Beis Shammai only argues when it's 10 tvachim high, but if it's low, he agrees. Beis Shammai will hold that even with a low wall, you would less than 10 tvachim, you would need an eruv for each person. So that's 2 different versions of this machlokas. Pligi b'Rav Chia, Rav Shimon b'Rebbe. The machlokas between Rav Chia and Rav Shimon, the son of Rebbe. Chad Amar, machlokas b'mechimet samagis latikra. That if you have walls that reach the ceiling, then there's the machlokas Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai will hold in that case, clearly we have 5 separate dwellings. And the chiddush of Beis Hillel would be that even if you have walls that go up to the tikra, since they live in one house, it's considered one rishus. So, but if you have walls that don't go up to the ceiling, even Beis Shammai will agree that one eruv is enough. That's the way one Amoira learns. That's when Beis Hillel is matir one eruv for all 5, when the walls don't go up to the ceiling. But in that case, Beis Hillel would be machmir like Beis Shammai. Beisvei. So we'll ask you a kasha from the Baraisa. Amrav Yudah Asaber. Loy nechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al mechitza magius letikra. There's no machlokes shetzrichen ever kol chavur v'chavura. That's like the second mandomar that we just quoted. So it's going to be a kasha on the first mandomar. So the one who says that there's a machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, even when the walls go up to the ceiling, according to this Baraisa, it seems to be a kasha. And it's a support to that mandomer. And remember, Rav Nachman, the second version of Rav Nachman said that when it's a small wall, there's also machlokas. So that also there's a kasha on all three things. And let it be a tiyufta to that version as well. No, they're arguing in a wall and they're arguing with a low wall. I had to come give him a chitza. Why don't you just tell me that they're arguing in the wall to show me how matir Beis Hillel is, that even if you have a full mechitza, Beis Hillel is still going to allow you to do an air of one for all five. So the Gemara says, why don't you show me how stringent Beis Shammai is that you require an individual eruv even when you have walls less than 10 tefachim? Here comes a famous answer. Koach de'etera adif. Being a matir is always more powerful. Chazal much prefer quoting the version that ends up with a heter than ends up with a chumrah. So it's always easy to make chumras. Koach de'etera adif. That was the koach of Rav Moshe Feinstein. He would always find koach de'etera. Om Rav Nachman Rav. Halacha Rav Yehuda Saber. The halacha is like Rav Yehuda Saber of lo nechleku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel mechitza magius letikra. That if you have a wall going all the way to the ceiling, then everybody agrees. Our Mishnah, you can deduce from our Mishnah the same thing. Diketani, what does it say in our Mishnah? When each one has their own room, clearly there are full walls, or they live upstairs. What does it mean? My chadorim umay aliyos. Chadorim mamish, valiyas aliyos mamish pshita. That the Gemara says that can't be the case because that would be a davar pashut. Elalav kein chadorim, kein aliyos, meaning you have you don't have a full separation. You have you have sort of like a minor separation. Umay niyo mechidas hamagias latikrish mamina. So if you have walls that go up to the ceiling, so that's like a full-fledged cheder. And we see, l'chol hadeyos, they will hold that each one needs their own eruv. Shema Mino, it's a good ride from our Mishnah. By the way, we're learning, today's learning is Alan Genauer's brother was Melech ben Binyamin Zev. So the learning should go Aliyas Neshama Melech Genauer. Tana. B'medvar mamurim kishamoy lichanes Eruvin l'makom acher. So Beis Shammai said that if you have a house that's divided into 5 rooms, there was a machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel whether each has to give their own eruv. So the Gemara says, when that the machlokas is operative. If they're going to put the loaf of bread in another house in the chutzner, but if they decide to put the loaf of bread into this house, even Beis Shammai will hold that you can deposit one loaf of bread. You don't have to put a loaf of bread in each of the 5 houses. And who was the fine brisa like? So 5 people live in a chutzner, and they each gave money, and they bought a loaf of bread. When they deposit the Eruv somewhere else, Eruv echad lekulon. So the one loaf of bread serves for all of them. So Kiman Kebeis Hillel, because we've previously learned that it's only, Beis Shammai only agrees when they deposit the loaf in their house. But if the loaf is going to be deposited in the other house, then it's only Beis Shammai, it's only Beis Hillel who says one Eruv can work for all five. Beis Shammai would require all five to deposit a loaf of bread in that house. The Ikedi Amri, some people say, when is one Eruv going to work for all five when it comes to their house? But when you're going to deposit the Eruv in another person's house, you need an Eruv. The loaf of bread has to come from each house. So therefore, Kamanaz Lahadetanya, Chamisha Shagavus Eruvon. 5 people lived in an apartment complex that opens up into a chutzner, and they want to carry into the chutzner. So they each give $1. They buy a loaf of bread. Kiman. So that's the lo kechad. So according to Beis Hillel, it works both ways. Both when they deposit the Eruv somewhere else, both when the Eruv is deposited in their house, you only need one. So it's not like Beis Hillel. It's certainly not like Beis Shammai. Because Beis Shammai says when you deposit the Eruv somewhere else, each one needs to give a loaf. So Kemad de lo kechad. So it's like neither of the mandamrim. Mishnah. Ha'achin shayu oichlin al shulchan aviyim v'yeshenim bevateim. So a father is lucky enough to have his sons live in the same chutzner he lives. They all have homes in the chutzner. But the brothers, the sons, eat at the father's table. So it looks like it doesn't make a difference where you eat. It makes a difference where you sleep. So since they sleep in their own homes, if they don't participate in the Eruv, they would aser, so they have to participate in the Eruv. If one of them forgot to participate in the Eruv, like any situation where a Jew forgot to participate, he's mevatel his rishus to the other people. Now, when is all of this operative? Emasai bisman shmolich and Eruvin b'makom acher. Right? Either the loaf of bread is deposited at one of the other houses, or they could decide to deposit the loaf of bread in their house. Now, if you deposit the loaf of bread in your house, you don't have to participate in the money. They use your house, that's enough. So when do we say that they have to participate in the Eruv? That's if it's not going to be placed in their house or the father's house. If the Eruv is going to be placed where they are, even where they eat, like where their father is, or in one of their houses, or it's only the brothers and the father that live there, then they're viewed as one family, and therefore they don't have to make an Eruv. So the Gemara deduces correctly, Shmamina Mokom Lina Goyrim, by saying that if the brothers eat by their father's house, but they sleep in their own house, they have to participate in their own Eruv. It looks like where somebody sleeps is what defines whether you need an Eruv. Rashi, so let's say they slept in their father's house, and even if they put the Eruv somewhere else, they eat by their father, they live by their father, so they would not have to participate in their own Eruv. So let it be a tiyuf to the Rav, who says
if they slept in their own, let's say the father owned all the houses and each child slept in a different house, but the father owns everything. But that still could be, you still need
No,
an
I don't
heir.
think, I don't think it's necessarily ownership. I think it's whoever's if they sleep there with their families, it's going to be a separate deal.
Even if the father owns it all, one whole section that he lives, that would make a difference then, huh?
So as long as the house is miyuchad for him, that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. The father supports them, but they live in their own house, and lachora could be even if the father owns those houses.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure it's totally in ownership, although I can't say for sure. I'm reading the Shulchan Aruch. Achim shayu yeshenim kol echad beveso hamiyuchad lo b'chatzer. Right? If it's been designated for him, it doesn't say that he owns it, but it's a good shaila. So Amri Amarav Mekable Pras Shonu. We don't really mean that this is a case where the kids eat at their father's house. He gives them a stipend. He gives them a stipend. Their expenses are paid by the father. It's not mash. So therefore, it's not a raya. See, it's not a raya that Mokum Lina going. Because they are dwelling in their own, they're sleeping in their own house. It's versus eating somewhere else. This is not a case where they ate at they never went to their father's house. They ate and slept there. So there's no kasha and rab. You can't deduce anything from that. Ton Rabbanon. Misha yesh lo shar achzandra umer peses b'chatzer chavero. A beis shar is like a house, a gatehouse, right? You have a gate with a house. Now people don't sleep there. I guess like a watchman could sit there. An achzandra is like a patio, or pes it's like a balcony. People don't live there. So therefore, Hareze ein oiser olav. If these things extend into a chutzner, these things are not called a dira. And therefore, they won't aser on the other people living in that chutzner. However, if a person owns a beis hatevim, you own a straw, a barn where you store straw. There's beis habakar, or a corral, a house where the cows are, or beis ha'etzim, or a house that was used to store firewood, ubeis ha'otzaros, or other kind of storehouse. These are called dirot. While Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, Eina Oyser Lamokum Dira Bilvad. He argues, if you don't sleep, I guess these other places, you can't really sleep there. And therefore, it's not roy to aser. On Rav Yehuda, Ma'aseh ben Nafcha, Shaylo Chamesh Chatzeres be'Usha. Ben Nafcha he owned 5 courtyards in Usha. Ubo Ma'aseh de Chachamim ve'Amru, Eina Osher el Beis Dir Bilvad. He only lived in one of these chatzeros. He owned the other ones. So Rabbi Yehuda said, the Chachamim said, he only asers in the one that he lives in. The chatzeros that he doesn't live in, he doesn't aser. So the Gemara says, Beis Dira Sakadaitich. But these other places are also called Beis Dirot. How could you say they're not called Beis Dirot? Ela'ema Makom Dira. He only answers in a place where he physically sleeps in. If he has a dira somewhere, he doesn't physically sleep there, then it doesn't answer. Now the Gemara doesn't understand, what does it mean Makom Dira? So my makom dira, Rav Omar, makom pita. It's where he eats his meals. Ushmuel Omar makom lina. So this is going to carry on this machlokas that we've been dealing with. By the way, the Shulchan Aruch says, Hagar bebeis shar b'achzandro v'mirpeses. Somebody's living in a gatehouse or in a balcony. Ain't a oser. He doesn't aser and he doesn't need to be participant in the eruv. But if someone lives in a beis hateven, beis habokar, beis ha'etzim, kiven sheyesh mehem makom dira, I guess those places always had a place for a watchman to sleep in. So they're chashuvim em dira. V'adar b'hem oimer oiser ad shi'arv. And therefore, if a person dwells there, he would prohibit without a name. Okay, so